There are some nights when sleep doesn't come easy, when the quiet hum of the night feels like a warning, not a comfort. Tonight, you'll hear true stories from real people, stories that even they wish they could forget. Turn off the lights, if you dare. But remember, not everything that watches you in the dark is human. It happened to Eva during her first winter alone. She had just moved into a small rental cottage on the outskirts of Oregon, nestled against a dense forest that the locals simply called the woods. The nights were the hardest part, not because of loneliness, but because of the way the trees seemed to lean toward her home, as if whispering through the glass. One night, as snow hammered against the windows and the power flickered, Eva sat curled up on the couch reading a book. Around midnight, she felt it, that unshakable feeling that someone was watching her. At first, she ignored it. Then came the soft tap, tap, tap at the living room window. Light, gentle, deliberate. Her heart seized. She turned slowly. In the dim moonlight filtering through the trees, she could make out a shape, not a shadow, a figure. Tall, lean, pale face pressed against the glass. It didn't move. Frozen in terror, Eva dared not blink. The tapping continued, rhythmic, like a broken clock ticking. She finally found the courage to grab her phone and call the police. But when she glanced back at the window, he was gone. The police arrived 20 minutes later. No footprints, no signs of anyone. "You sure you weren't just imagining it?" the officer asked gently. Eva shook her head. As he turned to leave, the officer hesitated. "Lock all your doors. These woods, they have a way of letting things in." That night, Eva slept with a kitchen knife under her pillow. The next morning, she found it, pressed against the inside of her bedroom window, a handprint. Sophia was a college freshman, living in an old, crumbling dormitory in New England. Her roommate, Lila, was shy, quiet, and spent most of her nights at the library. One Friday night, Sophia returned to their room early after a canceled party. As she unlocked the door, she heard soft sobbing inside. Concerned, she called out, "Lila, are you okay?" No answer. The crying continued. Sophia pushed open the door. The room was empty. The crying was coming from the closet. Shaking, she approached. "Hey, it's okay, I'm here," she whispered, reaching for the closet door. Just as her fingers touched the handle, the sobbing stopped. Instant silence. Heart hammering, she flung the door open. It was empty, just clothes, boxes, dust. That night, Lila didn't come back. The next morning, the RA knocked on Sophia's door, pale and trembling. "Lila's body was found last night," she said quietly, "in the library bathroom. She had been there for hours." Diego had just inherited his grandfather's farmhouse deep in rural Argentina. It was beautiful but falling apart, and strange rumors clung to it like ivy. Locals spoke of La Sombra, the shadow that watched from the staircase. Diego, a skeptic, dismissed it all. But the first night he stayed there, he heard footsteps on the old wooden stairs. Slow, heavy, dragging. Thinking it was an animal, he grabbed a flashlight and peered out his bedroom door. Halfway up the stairs, he saw it, a silhouette, featureless, shimmering like heat waves, staring right at him. It didn't move like a person. It floated, almost trembling with each step it took toward him. Diego slammed his door shut and braced it with a chair. The footsteps stopped, right outside. Then a soft, rasping voice whispered through the crack in the door. "You shouldn't have come back." He never stayed another night in that house. He sold it for a fraction of its worth. Last he heard, the new owners disappeared without a trace. Maya's backyard bordered a cemetery, old, forgotten, overgrown. She loved gardening, planting roses and sunflowers under the open sky. But there was one patch of soil near the back fence where nothing ever grew. One evening, while weeding near that spot, she caught movement out of the corner of her eye. A woman, dressed in tattered white, standing just beyond the fence. Maya blinked. Gone. The next night, it happened again. Only this time, the woman was closer, standing inside the fence line. Maya told herself it was grief playing tricks on her. She had recently lost her mother. Until one rainy night, she found muddy footprints leading from the empty garden bed all the way to her back door. And scratched into the wood with long jagged marks were two words, "Let me in." She moved out the next week. The garden bed still remains barren, as if scorched from beneath. Natalie and Chris had just brought their newborn son home. They lived in a modest house on the edge of a quiet suburban neighborhood. Late one night, while Chris was at work, Natalie dozed off on the couch with the baby monitor crackling softly beside her. Around 2:13 a.m., a static-filled voice whispered through the monitor, "Get up." Natalie jolted awake, heart racing. She stared at the monitor screen. It was blank, just white noise. Maybe she had imagined it. Maybe it was interference. But as she tried to settle back down, she heard it again, louder, clearer. "He's not safe." Natalie sprinted to the nursery. Her son was sleeping peacefully. She checked the windows. Locked. Doors. Locked. Shaken, she unplugged the monitor and held her baby close until morning. The next day, Chris set up a new, brand-name monitor with better encryption. But that night, the voice came back. Not through the monitor this time. From inside the nursery itself. Whispering, laughing, crying. They moved out 2 days later, never returning for the deposit. The landlord later admitted, years ago a man had died in that house, in that same nursery room, alone. In 2019, 4 friends took a road trip across Arizona. Hours of driving, sun beating down, tires chewing up endless miles of empty desert highway. One wrong turn off a service road led them deeper into nothingness. At first, they thought it was just a detour. Then the road narrowed into cracked, broken dirt. Then the signs disappeared. Then their phones lost service. Panic settled like dust on their skin. The sun began to set, fast. They decided to turn around. But when they did, they realized something horrifying. The road behind them wasn't the same. It twisted unnaturally, the landscape warping as if mocking them. Ancient, decayed gas stations stood where there had been none. Abandoned cars rusted into the earth. They drove for what felt like hours, in circles, but kept ending up back at the same burned-out church standing alone against the dead horizon. And each time they passed it, something was closer, something in the windows, watching. When they finally found their way back to a main road by sheer luck, they didn't speak for hours. They later learned there was no service road marked where they claimed they had driven, no old church, nothing, just open, endless desert. Deep in the heart of Ireland, there's an old superstition. 3 knocks at the door means death is coming. Bridget had heard the stories growing up. Old wives' tales, she thought, nothing more, until the night it happened to her. She was sitting alone, drinking tea by the fire when the first knock came. Solid, heavy, boom. She opened the door, nobody there. She shook it off, probably the wind. Minutes later, second knock, louder, boom. Heart racing, she swung the door open again. Nothing, just the rolling fog of the Irish moors. She locked the door, bolted the windows. When the third knock came, it was so loud it rattled the walls. But this time, it wasn't at the door. It was behind her. Turning slowly, she saw it. A tall, cloaked figure standing in the fireplace's shadow, face hidden, finger pointing directly at her. Bridget fainted. When neighbors found her the next morning, she was alive. But her hair had turned completely white. She never spoke again. Dr. Lena Patel worked late shifts at a downtown hospital. One night, after a particularly rough ER session, she was finishing her paperwork alone. As the clock struck 3 a.m., a patient entered, or so she thought. The man was pale, dressed in tattered hospital clothes, his eyes hollow. He didn't speak, just pointed at the last examination room. Without a word, Dr. Patel followed. Inside, the air was cold, too cold. The lights flickered. When she turned to address him, the room was empty. No patient. The only thing there was an old medical chart lying open on the exam table. It was dated 1982. The patient's name was listed as unknown, cause of death, unexplained disappearance. She quit her job 2 months later, after more patients began showing up, all at 3 a.m. Liam grew up in a small town surrounded by thick woods. The rule was simple: never, under any circumstance, go into the woods after dark. One night, drunk on teenage bravado, Liam and his friends broke the rule. At first, it was just darkness. Then, laughter, high-pitched, wrong, coming from every direction. They ran. Branches clawed at them. Roots seemed to grab their ankles. When they finally burst out onto the main road, panting and bleeding, they realized one of them was missing. They went back the next morning with the sheriff. No sign of him, except for a torn piece of his jacket, hanging 30 feet high in the branches. No one ever saw him again. Liam never set foot near those woods again. He says sometimes at night when the wind is just right, you can still hear the laughter. Are you sure it's over? Like, share and subscribe for more of these terrifying real-life horrors. Click the bell for the next dark tale, and remember, the scariest part isn't hearing the stories. It's that they could be happening to you right now.